For a lot of this review, I referred to Dear Charlie XCX as Charlie XCC. I am too much of a fan of the group XTC. It rolls off the tongue. I apologize to everyone who is upset by this. Please try not to be too annoyed by it. Anyway, let's carry on. So it's pretty obvious I'm not the market demographic for this particular release, for Charlie XCC in general. So what am I doing listening to this album? Well, enough people hype it up. There's a lot of acclaim around this record. It's shortlisted for the Mercury Prize, apparently. I might as well give it a spin. Digital spin. I find myself... Here's the thing. I'm not really a fan of Charlie XCC's music outside of this, to the extent which I was familiar with it beforehand, and insofar as I explored bits and pieces of it after listening to How I'm Feeling Now, I'm not impressed personally. Well, it's not for me. I'm not really a big fan of party pop music and such. And if I am not as fascinated or captivated by more modern production techniques, or at least the ones she was dealing with on those particular releases. There appears to be an exception, however. The sonics of How I'm Feeling Now are really captivating to me. This very lush and considered. It's very kind of sleek pop stylings, and it's very much a it's album, one of these very confessional pop albums, very this is me, this is who I am sort of release. But there's also great attention to making these kind of enormous odes to the contemporary pop song itself. For better or for worse, I don't necessarily love the general summation of what the general pop song of today can be considered, although I really like how it comes out within How I'm Feeling Now. Again, I have to admit, I've never been overly keen on auto-tune, especially because, look, this is just me, I actually find a lot more tolerable female auto-tune. I find a lot more tolerable than male auto-tune. I just can't stand it personally for the very most part. In an experimental context, I can kind of enjoy it. But in a mainstream pop context, I don't know why it's there. I don't know why people enjoy it other than, oh, this is considered abrasive by people older than us. Isn't this great? I don't know. I mean, that's fun and all that. We can all. I enjoy punk rock to some point as well, but I'm being silly. So why does this album in particular stand out to me amongst Charlie XCC's discography here? I think it's a pop manic styling. It's so intense and it's so. You can't ignore it. It gets to a point where you're so accustomed to its flavors, and all you can do is just sit back and just relish in the kind of contact high. You might consider this part of the very common genre of I can do no wrong core, although nevertheless she makes me captivated by her pathos, and I'll compare and contrast her just for a moment. I find Charlie XCC's let's say her disposition and priorities, I would contrast it to the magnificent, considered, and thoughtful musings of Little Simz on How I'm Feeling Now. Maybe hip-hop is a better medium, better genre to express this sort of thing, rather than kind of party pop music as Charlie XCC has in How I'm Feeling Now. Although, nevertheless, what I find the amazing commonality between them is how we have the first impression I get from Little Simz and from Charlie XCC both is these enormous, these larger than life personalities. They're these kind of unignorable, phenomenal kind of artistic pathos. It would have been easy for the record industry to market these two phenomenally beautiful women as these kind of, Madonna-esque, not necessarily the pop star Madonna, but, these grand, glorious, untouchable idols. But what they've become are these gracious and giving, caring friends to those who want to experience their music. They're almost no different from that person down the street. It is like someone who paints pictures for people, writes songs for them, and generally wants to make people happier around them. When you look at someone, you project an idea onto them. They become kind of an object, maybe of the male gaze, depending on one's disposition. They become an object insofar as they become idealized as an item which, if you have it, it will improve your situation. Characters like Charlie XCC and Little Sims, on the other hand, empower one so that they can feel as though they can conquer any situation, any scenario that comes their way, and they don't need any object or anything other than their own confidence to feel a sense of happiness and satisfaction. Figures like Charlie XCC and Little Sims become undefinable. They become such dynamic characters that it's impossible to project anything onto them, only to be swept up in and in awe of their kind of, oceanic personas. I'm especially thinking of this in regard to Little Sims in particular, but to some extent I think we can gauge this from Charlie XCC. She's not glorifying who she is so much as trying to gauge who she is. There's an unaggressive plea, an unabrasive plea, a loving plea to let go of shame and to embrace good mood and feeling. I think there's a degree to which some could embrace these sort of pop star lifestyles as, I guess, reckless and irresponsible, and not the sort of thing young people ought to look up to. I remember there was certain people felt consternation over young people looking up to figures like, I don't know, Katy Perry or maybe even Lady Gaga, to the degree to which they misunderstood the point of some of that music. I'm not the biggest fan of some of these artists personally, but certainly to take the example of Katy Perry or the example of Ariana Grande, there's a certain kind of, haha, isn't this kind of, party kind of rambunctious sex, drugs and rock and roll lifestyle, isn't this great? Isn't it great to get, trashed and fucked up on the weekend and blah, blah, blah. I don't think there's anything wrong with this, although I think for people who aren't into that lifestyle personally, they just find the music a bit alienating, and they wonder why are these people trying to make us feel bad for not engaging in that. I've heard people express this to me, and I try to assure them that it's not, it's not satanic or anything like that. I don't assume so. I doubt it. But I don't remotely get this vibe from this particular release of Charlie XCC. Maybe someone could point out, oh, what about that lyric? And it's like, oh, okay, I didn't notice that, I suppose. But what I get here is it's like she's trying to find that place where you can be kind of sated forever, rather than, oh, okay, this, and, one's expectations are kind of terrifying, because you build up everything, and one's motivated by, okay, this is going to feel like there's some sort of reward impulse. And then they get there, and there's a certain existential dread submerged beneath. Why do I still feel like doing other things? I thought I was supposed to be happy now. Charlie XCC, in the midst of a lockdown, decides that it's just best to go with the flow and not think about the more... Perhaps I'm reminding me of the polar opposite, in a way, Clint Eastwood's ethos of, well, or what was described as Clint Eastwood's ethos by Kenneth Turan, I think, analysis leads to paralysis. There's this Charlie XCC's idea is that we need to embrace the gifts and good fortunes which we have, especially in a time as dire as what 2020 was for so many of us. And so she implores this, and we'll get into the backstory of how she composed this album, because it makes me appreciate the meaning and the statements and the intent behind the album so much more. The idea that keeping going and feeling motivated for the next good feeling is enough. It isn't a depressing thought that it's not like it's depressing that once one has a meal they'll feel hungry again eventually. Conversely, one would feel good, about the prospect of, I love this individual and I want to love them every day. It doesn't depress one that, I still want to love them. I'm not trying to be too crude when I describe that there. Charlie XCC has been swept up in the Poptimus lifestyle, and she's wondering sincerely if this was the happiest course of action in her life, but then realises that what's the point in believing in regrets? I remember a Steve Hackett lyric that once went, worry is interest paid before it's due. I get that vibe from this particular release, and that is a great, great thing. Charlie XCC, Charlotte Emma Aitchison, you are a fantastic artist. Absolutely. You don't need me to tell you that, although absolutely don't let anyone ever bring you down at any point. Certainly not by me referring to you as Charlie XCC instead of XCX. I really, really hope it doesn't anyway. I actually think I'll close this video before I go into the backstory of who Charlie XCX is and the recording process of this album. I'll encourage one to, if they're so inclined, do so on their own accord, because I feel as though I don't want to spoil it. I feel like this has gone on for far too long at this point, and I suspect that those who had no intention of, who aren't interested, have already turned it off, and those who are, do so at your own accord. Let your conscience guide you now. Let your intuition guide you now. Thanks again, anyone who has made it this far. I appreciate your time.